The Six of Cups is known as pleasure, and indeed, if we look at the 6 cups upon this card, we can see that they are formed somewhat like the actual Tree of Life, suggesting straight away that this card is talking about finding pleasure in its many forms here upon the world that we actually live in and within the universe of which we experience. On the Rider-Waite deck, we can see a hazy image suggesting a type of golden memory or even a dreamlike vista, asking perhaps the reader to hearken back to wonderful times of yore, and the offering of a flower as a symbol of friendship and of a blooming relationship. On the Tree of Life, this card is centred in Tifereth, of which means beauty, and indeed we can really see here that this card is concerned with finding that beauty in the world and taking pleasure in it. And so Tifereth represents the descent of divine consciousness, what we may call God, into the lens of our bodies and our localized consciousness, so that we can experience ourselves from different angles and find life and light and brilliancy in the world. And this sphere is ruled by the sun, and indeed this card is very much concerned with the sun. It's really yellow and bright in its colour, and we have a double aspect of the sun coming through in it because it is ruled by the sun in Scorpio, and so the sun is central in the card straight away. And Scorpio speaks about transformation, which is something that we're going to see in this card, and it also has the element of sexual unity and the creative power of that, of which we shall come to later. And yet the sun in Scorpio there is really going in for that passion and devotion, of which is seen in this astrological sign and the 8th house of which it is centered in. And so it's about deep feelings and powerful driving emotions, of which in themselves often induce or are induced by the sensations of pleasure. And so we can see upon the card that at the very bottom are 10 lotus stems appearing to actually come from the direction of the observer of the card, and we got 5 on that side and 5 on the other, representing harmony and balance, which is something else we see in this, because the number 6, unlike the previous card, has balanced these cups perfectly and harmoniously upon each other. And so these 10 stems of the lotuses are the 10th Sephiroth on the Tree of Life, of which is Malkuth, kingdom. And so this is a card of grounding us here in this physical world and looking at the things of the world of which has brought us that pleasure. And so often the card can represent that type of naive happiness of childhood and a desire to return to those hazy memories, such as we saw on the Rider-Waite card. And it can represent a great love of having had these experiences. It's not just a memory, it's something that's actually made us who we are in some way. It's part of our very existence upon this earth. And if we look at theories such as causistic formation, it is believed by some that the places themselves where the memories took place contain something of that passion and that pleasure within them. And when we invoke a memory such as that, something within the actual place it happened is set forth into sparks of creative memory within the very function and form of its being. And so that's what those 10 stems there are saying. It's grounding us in the world of which we live in, which is often, as we've seen on the series many times, sometimes neglected by spiritual seekers, and yet we do live in the world. Inside the actual cups, it's quite difficult to see, but there are snakes inside the cups. And this, of course, is a symbol of deep transformation and of regeneration. That being because the snake, of course, sheds its skin, and as this snake moves forward, it leaves its old skin behind. And so this, in a simple way, could be meaning that we are trying to induce within ourselves a feeling of renewal. We want to experience a moving forward and a leaving behind of the bad, moving away from what's held us back, what's hurt us, and saying we've learnt from that, but we're going to move on. And we can see that also reflected in the sea in this card. it's a little bit different to how it was before. The sea has a rather grey look to it, and so this is showing that we've come out of a storm, we've persevered through a very difficult time in our lives, and we've come out the other side and have looked back towards it. All of us have experienced being in a storm, maybe not literally, but metaphorically. We've found ourselves in a situation where it may even feel hopeless, or it could just feel that we want to be let free from this bad situation. And we don't give up, of course, because we're sitting here watching this video now. We're still here, we've come through it, we've learnt from it, and so the sea here is showing the storms behind us. We've lived through it, and imagine the life of a sailor upon a wooden sailing ship actually going through a literal storm. Ice, snow, rain pelting down upon them, the intense difficulty that they would have experienced, and they may have felt like they wanted to give up and throw themselves into that sea, but they didn't. They got through it, and at the other side were rich new horizons and fertile lands for them to explore, and so we've come out of that onto the other side. The cups themselves, of which actually have these snakes encased within them, are said to be made out of brass, and so this is bringing us to another rather esoteric function of this card. The card is pleasure, and as we've seen, we can take pleasure in a great many things in the physical world, and pleasure often brings us healing, and brass in alchemy was a healing element. It is also, of course, a metal which is made out of copper and zinc. And in alchemy, copper is a feminine element and zinc is a masculine element, and so we have a harmony and a duality within the actual copper, and this is showing a sexual alchemy, as are the symbols of the snake and the cups. The snake being inside the cup is quite clearly a symbol of sexual coming together, and of course it's a very powerful energy. It's an energy powerful enough to give birth to a new life, and so this is representing something of which was a secret in the esoteric mystery traditions of which a lot of these symbols are based on. What was called sex magic was essentially producing something of value, manifesting something for us or for the world in general, perhaps, something of great pleasure, of great joy, and a healing out into the world through the union of a type of sexual alchemy, of which Crowley has also shown as connected with the Holy Grail and things like that on other cards. It's the fulfillment of the sexual will, and what that means is love, a coming together, a joining together, and a production from that unity of new life. And even if we're not talking about a physical baby, the new life could be the life of a project, the life of the building of a home, or the life of a new venture into business or into life or marriage or whatever it's going to be. And so that is that coming together. In Eastern religions, the balance here of the snakes and the cups could also be the redirecting of sexualized energy and the transmutation of the energy into a form of meditation and a type of channeling of this very powerful creative energy to result in enlightenment, of which brings us back to the Kundalini awakening experience and Kundalini yoga in general. And this brings us back to the element of Scorpio and the suggestion of transformation that we see in the card, because when we lose ourselves in the sea of pleasure, which again can be interpreted in any way of which you need it to be for the moment, doesn't have to be this sexual alchemy. It can be the pleasure being overtaken by any form of love, and when we're overtaken by that, we die to the moment, and that's the death element in Scorpio coming, and then of course we are reborn. We come back to our senses and we're back into the physical world, renewed, and having put out a very, very powerful energy of which comes back to us in manifestations, in people, things, and projects lining up around us. And so bringing up the Six of Cups in your reading is a really good card. It's talking about a pleasure of which you have experienced in your life. It's saying you have had a wonderful life. There are all these great things that have happened to you in life, and take great respect to remember them, and because the very earth itself remembers them too. And it may also say that by this respect and this remembering of great things, we're going to go through a period of transformation and healing. The brass cups are healing. Brass is a healing element, and it contains snakes within it to transform us, and so as we're healed, we are transformed. It's also a card quite clearly concerned with relationship, and it's asking us not just to go out looking for any old type of relationship, but to be open in our heart centre to a relationship of somebody of whom can share in the pleasure of deep love upon all aspects of our being, and therefore bring that love into all aspects of our journey through the universe.